I just want to establish when the cruelty of mankind is going to stop. Because the creator of this world, the creator of man, the creator of life, created man with pride and gave him volume of intelligence over the rest of the other living things. Hence he even called him man. He gave that man the rules and regulations that needs to govern him. But man actually overlooked all those regulations. You know, the mighty God actually gave man the intelligence to be in the position to name certain things or to give certain items names or to be in the position to give descriptions over certain things. Yes, man was given that kind of an intelligence to identify animals with colors. Yes, the cows, you find the black, you find the brown, you find the black and white. You will find the lions in different colors. You'll find the fish in different colors. You'll find the snakes in different colors. But God gave a man to be in the position to give those type of names of colors or names to identify those other type of species. But God never gave man intelligence to actually to identify himself with a color. We can say whatever we want. A man is not actually classified with a color. If we look into the whole entire situation of the past, after the world was created, where we had the whole entire continents with different nations and tribes, yes, with different types of religions, cultures and traditions, we never had a point or a situation whereby, even in the Bible, in the Quran, yes, in the Torah, you had humans being called with or being addressed based on colors. I've never heard in the Bible whereby humans were addressed as whites. Human was addressed as blacks. I've never heard in the Quran humans being addressed with color, black, white. I've never heard that. Of course, in the Torah as well. I've traveled nowadays actually along those countries as well. I found things that have changed completely. Why man actually decided to classify human species with colors? Do we have a white man? Do you know the color of white? A color of white is something that looks like this page. White. Do you have humans that look like this color? I've gone through the whole entire continent, the global societies. I've never seen a man that looks like this. Why do you call those that God has created with pride white and still come up with the fiber element of some kind of human ingredient, saying they are white race? Why? Because I have never seen humans that look like this color. It came to another way again. God never created humans with this color. What is this color? This color is black. Did you ever see humans that look like this? Yes, I have seen animals. The cows, the cats, the dogs, whatever, in this color. I've never seen humans that look like this. Now, why in particular should man actually be addressing the others as black? God has never created black man. God has never created white man. Like as I've already indicated or reflected, not even in the holy books of all types of religions, we find humans actually being addressed based on the color reflection. But the cruelty of man, the hatred of man, based on what we don't know, came up when man started actually classifying one another with color. Humans start calling one another names. Black. Humans start calling one another names, especially those who crossed over into mixed marriages. The offspring would be called colored. Why the cruelty? If we have offended one another, if we had problems among ourselves, why should we go to an extent of actually looking down upon the manner in which God created us? He gave us a volume of intelligence to be in a position to describe the other animals that of course are living on planet Earth, because he gave them specifically those type of colors I've just showed you. But he has never came up with a white man and a black man. Because you hated one another, because you still hate one another, you still actually address one another as black race, white race. Let me give you something lovely, surprising about this. We know the black race, a black man, is associated with the darkness of evil, the darkness that of course it does not actually make sense in the eyes of the God who actually created them. We know for a fact that those who are insulting the so-called black man, they've got a reason to do that, because they've got some kind of hatred towards the humans that God created with pride. They call them black. They associate them with evil. They associate them with hell. We've got these people that are referred to as white. Along the line, they actually put themselves somewhere else simply because the brightness of the color white is actually associated with the heavenly activities. They believe and start thinking that, of course, they actually belong to God only. They are the only ones that belong to heavens above. These that are black, as they refer them as black, they don't belong to God. God has never made a white man. God has never made a black man. But the men that God created on planet Earth, with due to hatred of one another, they start calling one another names. And those names are associated with the ill doings associated with the darkness of the end of human life on planet Earth. Because those, of course, are actually called, associated with the darkness, is actually being assumed that, of course, they are evil. They don't belong to God. But those that, of course, are being said they are white, they are actually associated with the brightness of heavens. In most cases, even when you see the pictures of the angels that, of course, are being sent up from heaven above, you find that those angels are wearing white clothes. I've never seen one that is wearing a white gown or a white clothes. And that particular individual will actually be associated with the so-called a white person or a white man as an angel. Most of the pictures, most of the movies or whatever social media coming up demonstrating religions, the angels will actually be those that, of course, look brighter with complexion and being referred to as whites or belonging to the white race. And they'll be wearing white clothes. Why? Those that, of course, are having the so funny name given to them as blacks. You never see them being associated with angels or even wearing white outfits, white clothes as angels. But those that, of course, are associated with the wrongdoing that, of course, we refer to as evil, as Satan, all those type of things, you'll find those types of people actually wearing black outfits, black clothes. And for that matter, they'll be referred to as the fiber elements of hell. But why those type of insults to humans? Just because you've got that type of hatred among yourselves, you fight for certain things that you don't know, you will start associating yourselves with all these kind of funny things. Let's look at into one thing. When God created humans, He created them in different continents. Those continents were based on temperatures. Temperatures which of course affected the skins of those individuals who actually placed on that particular area. But they were not actually black, they were not actually white. They had what we call human defined color from God. Those of course are actually created in Europe or in subdivisions of the European continent are called Europeans or European continentals. Not whites. They are not white. They are European continentals. Those of course are born, are actually created in the African continent, which of course was subjected to some kind of temperature which affected the skin. Not to be like those that of course are a little bit lighter in Europe are actually called African continentals, not blacks. They are not black. Those that of course are actually created in another continent that of course we may say it's an Asian position. They've got that type of an in-between complexion. Hence they will be actually called based on their continental origins, continental situations. They will actually be referred to as Asians because they are from Asia. Now why do we have every time to be insulting one another, belittling one another? If I look at the whole entire subject, we had our own problems of the past. I would actually refer the problems to those who came before us. I'm talking about our ancestors, who actually classified themselves better than the others based on what they called a color of the skin, which of course they might have referred to as black. They captured them. They captured the African continentals. They looked down upon them as if they were subhumans, simply because they never looked like them. Have you forgotten the contention that God has created people to be different? We are born under the same sky, but we don't share the same horizon. We are different completely based on our continental origins. They'll go over, capture them, enslave them, persecute them, because they never actually regarded them as humans. Yes, those are the people of the times. Yes, we understand. They had their problems that of course, some of them we might not actually know or identify because we were not there. All what we know, all what we were told, all what was put before us is just that those who actually regarded themselves as better than the others, who actually had a lighter complexion from the European countries, they actually captured those from the African continent who actually referred them as low class towards them. But those people had their own problems. That is why at a later stage, this God, of course, who created us, realized that, of course, there are other people among the humans have crossed all the lines. He created people based on the places they were supposed to be living. He put right in their minds, they should understand not to be hating one another. Hence they forgave one another during those times, and the slaves were freed. Those who were enslaved were freed. Those that of course we used to be called black, they were freed. They lived in the past. That kind of a situation, that kind of bad time, yes, that cruel times went with people of the past, the ancestors of the Europeans and the ancestors of the African continentalists. We don't need to be actually reminding one another time to time about the past lives. We don't need actually to be saying, yes, the so-called, these that we call the white people actually enslaved us. They never enslaved us, the present generation, the offspring of today. The slavery issue actually happened during those times of the past. Now, those people of the past have forgiven each other, hence, today, the offspring of the ones that we refer to as European people and the African people are living together, are looking at each other with respect as humans. Even though we might be having the so-called generational curse, whereby the rest of the other people, when they are being reminded about their fathers, were on top of their game. Their fathers were masters. Their fathers were slave traders. They would still have this thing that, of course, will get into the nucleus of their brain in order to try to exercise that when it's gone already. We still got these, of course, the African continentals, who got what we call the generational curse as well, that actually goes within their hearts, their minds, to think about what happened in the past. Yes, their ancestors were actually enslaved, yeah, they were persecuted and all that. Then they started coming up, opening up the wounds. And those ones would come up with the so-called a hatred to mankind, to the so-called the white race. That means forgiving one another is not becoming a subject that, of course, we're supposed to be looking at. We are today's people. We are today's questions. We will be tomorrow's answers. We are today's answers because we are yesterday's questions. We've got to understand that. We cannot keep on living with this situation whereby we'll always be quoting about what happened in the past. The white people actually enslaved our fathers. The white people were so bad. The minute you keep on saying that, you never lived during these times. You are actually coming up, watering the soil, the seed of hatred that, of course, had to affect and make your life uncomfortable. Yes, on both sides. Because the minute you start hating these ones that you are saying the ancestors actually enslaved your ancestors, you are becoming provocative, because they won't just be standing out there defenseless. They will be defending themselves as well and saying, we were the masters of those times. God actually gave us this and that, coming up as if God gave them authority over the rest of the other things, whereas it's not like that. At the end of the day, there will always be those fights, which of course were not necessary. They've happened. People of the past had problems. People of the past had all the cruelty that of course was existing among them. But God came up and moistened up a soil that of course both ancestors could come together and understand they've got to live a life which of course is of great importance. Why can't we forgive one another? African people, we are aware that of course your ancestors were actually hurt, suffered a lot in the hands of the Europeans. Until when are you going to be living with this all entire situation, talking about it? Until when are you going to be having this position of a wound that is not healing? You, the so-called Europeans, we know for a fact that your ancestors were pretty bad towards the Africans. Why some of you are still practicing this whole entire situation of showing that your ancestors were on top of their games? They were actually the masters of the African people. The Bible quotes or reflects, forgive so that you can be forgiven. Let me tell you, your ancestors, African people, forgave those people. Let me tell you, the Europeans, your ancestors, accepted what was actually unleashed by the ancestors of the African people, who were actually enslaved. You people of today, why do you keep on pushing on this particular issue of reminding one another about what happened in the past with your ancestors? You were not there. You'll find it's about 100 years ago before you were born. Now, you want to bring that back. That is why this world does not have some kind of peace. I've realized something that, of course, is repeating the wounds time to time. The social media that will be coming up showing a black man that you call a black man, an African, being inside a flight. And he occupies some kind of a position in that flight. He might be an official of high ranking, but simply because those, of course, are working into that flight do not know him, he occupies some kind of seat. The fiber element of the past curse of hatred towards the Africans will actually feel those that, of course, will be in that flight. They'll start going to this particular individual, telling him off, you're not supposed to be into that flight or sitting onto that seat because it does not belong to him. Look at that. And that is actually making things worse every time. We go into some kind of companies whereby we find the fiber elements of those who are generational curses of that hatred towards the African people. They would not even be aware of the fact that the company that, of course, they are working for belongs to an African person. When the owner of that company comes in, not looking according to the way they expected him, with the colors that, of course, they've been given by you as mankind, they will start looking at him, swearing at him, chasing him around, make him feel uncomfortable. Look at that. What is the actual situation? How are you going to be forgiving each other if you keep on doing the wrong things that, of course, your ancestors did? Africans, Europeans, come together as one and understand forgiveness is of great importance. We know for a fact that once you forgive one another, based on the reflection of the Bible, God will answer with a forgiveness reflection to all that will make both parties to prosper in life. I guess we understand. I'll come to the second episode of this position, because we need to know the real thing that's supposed to be happening to our lives.